Never argue with an idiot. They will drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. What's your best real-life example of this? For a short while, I worked as a line cook at a Cracker Barrel, and there was a little saloon-style door that led to the staff section, kitchen, bathroom, etc. There was a staff-only sign on the door, above the doors, and on the wall behind the doors at eye level. Usually if someone from the customer side comes in, they said coming in, before opening the door, so they didn't hit anyone, but of course customers didn't know that. So when this dude opened the door and hit a waitress carrying a ton of drinks, we were reasonably upset with him. He said, "You should really put a sign up." We showed him all the signs and he goes, "That seems a bit excessive." My old office was across the street from a federal courthouse, and on the first Wednesday of the month when the bankruptcy people had court, our parking lot would always fill up with people illegally parking in our lot, despite "no parking. You will be towed. For realsies," signs being all over the place. Whenever they would inevitably park in our lot and I would tow them, they would come in and scream that they were going to sue us and that they towed us without warning. When cell phone cameras became common, I started taking a photo of each car before it was towed because they were almost always directly in front of one of the signs. This shut them up way less often than it should have. One guy accused me of photoshopping it. Anytime I've tried to explain marginal tax rates to an employee, that urban legend absolutely needs to die. So many people completely fuck themselves over for absolutely no reason because they heard someone else repeating it. Sometimes it can indeed work that way if you're on benefits or food stamps or similar, but taxes? No. Just no. Whoever came up with that lie has done a lot to keep the rich rich and the poor poor, at least a little bit. Convincing poorer and middle-class people that the government will screw them over if they get paid more, and that the boss is helping them out by paying them less. Ugh. And people are still falling for it to this day. All my coworkers think they'll lose so much money if they work overtime. As a result, I'm on like my 30th week of picking up on call and taking in the money. I've tried to explain it to them, but they don't listen. Fresh out of high school, I worked at a factory, and I had so many people advising me not to take too many extra shifts. They were all worried taxes would stiff them out of their extra days of work. I did not know how to explain to grown adults supporting families that they were just screwing themselves over. I thought I had a no-lose argument going up against someone who believes in homeopathy. I left the discussion feeling like I lost somehow. Edit. Appreciate all the comments. Some very funny replies. Just a quick clarification. I was specifically referring to homeopathic delusions as far as the argument discussion went. I felt like I lost because I was dumbfounded by their argument and realized quickly that it was a belief system that I was up against and didn't want to waste either of our time, the person being a naturopath that my wife used to go to. They had obviously had this argument many times and had various convoluted responses to all your standard points. Essentially, they had more experience in this argument than me. Thankfully, that interaction resulted in my kids no longer having to take so much medicine, which was my main issue because I could see that it was eroding their confidence. Sure, it's just water so it can't do any harm, right? Wrong. It meant every time they saw the naturopath they would come home with a whole new set of ailments, and the eventual thinking of, "What is wrong with me?" There was never anything wrong with them. I always ask why the remedies have the memory of almonds, or whatever, and not the memory of raw sewage. I used to argue a lot with my sister when we were kids. She would do this thing where she would say something, and then I would reference back to it literally a minute or two later to prove a point, and she would say, "I never said that," or, "That's not what I said." Absolutely impossible to argue with someone who will just deny having said things that could hurt their argument. Also, trying to change the course of an argument if they feel like they are losing. A coworker once called me an idiot for doing something incorrectly, when I was actually doing it the right way. When I politely explained to them that the way they suggested doing the task didn't actually work, they started asking, "Why are you getting so angry? I was just trying to help," etc. So now we're arguing about whether I'm angry or not instead of the right way to complete the task. My sister to a T. We once got into an argument over Mark Almond. She claimed he was the lead singer of Depeche Mode. I said that the lead singer was Dave Gahan. Cue an hour-long row about it. I was so enraged that I stormed off to a newsagent, found a music magazine with an article about one of them, bought it, and stomped back home to prove her wrong. When I triumphantly waved the article in her stupid bloody face, she said it was me who claimed Amon was the lead singer. It's roughly 40 years on, and to this day, I still don't know what caused me to explode the most. That she insisted I was wrong when I knew I was right, that she gaslit me about it when proved wrong, or that I spent about 45p on a copy of Smash Hits. Working retail. Especially when I worked in the tech shop of a computer store. Trying to convince someone their $500 laptop is never going to be a gaming system, no matter how many of the very few replaceable parts we throw at it, can be exhausting. Oh man, I've worked retail for the past 12 years and only recently have I experienced the ultimate low in my opinion. This woman paid us to service her e-bike. I've been a bicycle mechanic for the past 12 years, so she could grant it to her son, or neighbor, or whatever. I don't know, doesn't really matter anymore anyway. So we did, serviced it good, 2 people test it before she gets the invoice and notified her bike is ready. She comes and picks it up. And that should be that. The next day she arrives at our shop near closing, starts a fit with me saying how we didn't do a good job. So I asked her what the problem was. Apparently, she can't disengage her battery's lock anymore. This type of bike only has an electrical operated lock. I told her I was sorry to hear that, since that would basically mean the controller driver, equals brain of the bike, is malfunctioning. The only thing we're allowed to do is send that to the manufacturer to get it tested, possibly repaired, or maybe replaced. If a replacement is needed, that's a €250 plus fix. She didn't like that, and I can't blame her for that cause I wouldn't either, but she started blaming us. We didn't check the part, we updated the bike which probably ruined that part, you name it. I told her the timing is terrible, but if this happens there's nothing anyone could have done. Do note, this was a near 10 years old part, from a time where e-bike life expectancy was around 5 years. I told her all that calmly. She refused to believe me, then demanded to speak to someone higher up, which is funny, since I'm the first manager apart from my boss CEO. I told her to pick it up with him. My boss was on the same floor with another customer, pointed to him, told her he'd be there shortly, and I left the shop floor. She started talking to my boss, and at some point she lowered her voice a bit. My boss did the same. Later my boss told me she had a complaint about me. Her complaint was that I was too civil and verging on being emotionless. So, I was too good at my job, apparently. I told my boss I'll explode with rage or cry my soul out next time she has a complaint with me. I got the robot complaint once. To set the scene. 1. I'm a woman. 2. I was in my late 20s at the time. 3. I was the ops manager at my store, second in command. 4. Corporate was in charge of all advertising. This guy came in with the weekly ad showing a rifle set in mossy oak breakup, a camo pattern. It came with the rifle, a sight, and a matching sling in mossy oak breakup. Well, the ad department used the wrong photo for the gun, and we hadn't sold that combo for a few years. He was furious and told us we were doing a bait and switch. I explained in my best retail voice they probably put an old photo and that I'd send an email and check, and I told him he could choose a sling and a sight at no charge. There were several with the mob pattern. He lost his mind, yelled about what a ripoff we were. I calmly told him mistakes happen, and that he was getting a better deal, because the sling and sight would be name brands versus the generic ones that came in the package. He kept calling me Missy, little lady, and so on. I know he was trying to bait me into yelling back, but I wouldn't, which made him even more angry. I gave him the extension for the store director and told him what time he'd be in the next day, and that he could take it up with him, but he had to leave the store or I'd call the police. The next day, he met with the SD, who told him the exact same thing I had about the ad having a mistake, and that he could choose his own sling and sight, and we'd price match the ad. The guy was all smiles and thank yous to my male SD. He then lodged a complaint against me that I was too cold. Homeboy, I came into that conversation with a nice, warm tone. You don't get nice after you yell and curse at me. Wow, who would have thought that a guy throwing a fit about a rifle sale would also be a huge misogynist? That's just crazy. Social media debates. You won't convince someone they're wrong, you're screaming at a brick wall. Yeah, my first response was going to be Reddit or Facebook. It's truly insane how many people will keep going at you assuming fuck all when it's not something you actually said. People have the chance to read back what someone actually said, yet they don't and fuel their hatred for you on their worst assumption of what you said. I swear 90% of my downvotes are exactly that. However, I did have some very nice, civil, respectful discussions on Reddit, so not all hope is lost. This was best said. Never wrestle with pigs. You both get dirty and the pig likes it. George Bernard Shaw was arguing with this dude about something math-related. He didn't know how to read a study which involved statistics. Claimed he was in multiple AP math classes. Tried saying that I probably don't even know basic integration. Gave me a common integration problem. He wrote it but forgot the minus sign, making it unsolvable. I pointed it out, and he edited the comment to make it correct. Told him that some people can see when you edit comments. He claimed that he just capitalized a letter. On and on and on. Once worked with a guy who, by his own admission, got his rocks off by picking fights. He'd start an argument over the smallest thing. If you said it was white, he'd say it was black, just to try to start something. The one that always stood out for me was the weather app competition. One day he asked me what temperature it was, so I read it off my weather app. He got all offended, because his weather app said it was a couple degrees warmer. So he decides we're going to have a weather app competition. He was going to chart what our app said the temperature was, and at the end of the week, whichever one was closest to that day's high would be the winner. And the loser would have to start using the winner's app. To which I said, "What is your fucking problem?" So yeah? For the first few days, he'd make a big performance about marching into my office, recording the temperature off my app, jotting down some notes, and walking off. This started on a Monday. He gave up after Wednesday. Either because I was winning, or he was disappointed because, despite his best efforts, I just did not give a fuck about weather apps. Or maybe the boss told him to stop because I filed a complaint that this was bordering on harassment. That's an odd fellow. I had a coworker for a few years. I tried and tried to give him advice on doing a job that I had been doing for years. He repeatedly told me he didn't appreciate my advice, that he had won awards in his past job and to stay in my lane. Finally, we did a project together, and he admitted that I really did know what I was talking about, and he actually thanked me. But he continued to gaslight people and be a narcissist. I had the same discussion with someone at my job whom had been there for 2 weeks versus my 5 years at the time. I finally conceded by saying, "Maybe you're right. You've already been here for 2 weeks now. I've only been here for 5 years. You gotta know more than I do by now." I was listening to a podcast once, and the host articulated something profound in a very well-stated way. He said, I paraphrase, "I will never argue with a flat earther, or an anti-vaxxer, or any of those people. The reason is because that these people have made that into their whole identity, and they are prepared to address any possible argument I could come up with. And because I care about facts and truth and they do not, my only possible response would be, I'll have to look into that. I don't know off the top of my head. It doesn't matter that their response is incorrect or based on faulty research or has been rejected by the scientific community or whatever. By the time I discover that, they will be long gone and talking about how they won another debate. This is it in a nutshell. If you argue about an issue with someone who has made that one issue into the core of their persona, you will lose unless you are someone who has made arguing against that issue also into the core of your persona. Of course I know that Andrew Wakefield is a liar and a scammer, and of course I know that Apollo astronauts place retroreflectors on the moon which can be used to prove that they went there and that their photos of the spherical Earth are real. Because I've done enough research to convince myself. But have I done enough research to convince someone who refuses to be convinced? And someone who has also done that research and come up with plausible-sounding nonsense to counter each of these arguments. Why would I waste my life doing this? I had a coworker who was super into ancient aliens and Graham Hancock and young Earth creationism nonsense, and I was in grad school studying archaeology at the time. He was always trying to convince me that some dinosaur footprint was proof that humans and dinosaurs coexisted, or that some rock concretion somewhere was actually proof that fossilization occurs over hundreds of years instead of millions of years, and our dates for everything are wrong, never mind that paleontology and archaeology are different. Or that some carving somewhere is proof that humans had help from angels teaching them how to build monuments. I wouldn't always know what to say in response because I had to spend all of my time studying real papers from real archaeologists that related to my research, and I couldn't spend all my time reading crank conspiracy theories, so I wasn't up to date on how to debunk all the minutiae of whatever nonsense he heard on YouTube that week. It was maddening. Like I knew that whatever he was coming to me with was going to be false because of who he was as a person, but all I knew about it was what he explained to me, half remembered. Sometimes I would waste my lunch break looking this shit up just so he would stop pestering me about it. And it rarely worked anyway. Dude legitimately spent an entire shift trying to get me to believe that humans and dinosaurs coexisted, despite me having a pretty good background in human evolution. But evolution isn't real, so people who tell me they feel like something is or isn't illegal, when I know they're wrong but insist they know what they're talking about. For the record, I'm not a lawyer yet, but I'm about to start my final year of law school, and my undergrad is in legal studies. In one particular instance, I took a very specialized course that taught drone law. The person I was this with kept telling me I was wrong because they felt like, just wait till you have your bar license. I get called an idiot by Redditors all the time for explaining things that are literally in my practice area. Like I am literally a legal expert on these things, but sure, tell me I'm a basement-dwelling dweeb who can't read. My mom complaining how my generation wouldn't know how to do anything if it wasn't posted on the internet. I simply responded, well, what else is that generation supposed to do when the generation that raised them didn't teach them how to do anything? Keep in mind this while I'm moving files from her old Windows 8 laptop to her new Windows 10 for her via flash drive. She can't figure it out because Windows 10 is totally different. Obviously, it's not. Trying to get an old person to understand new technology when they have already decided against using it. My grandmother refused to use the stacking washer-dryer in her retirement apartment because it was too complicated. Same buttons as the one at her previous home, just in a slightly different place. I have a coworker who pretends he doesn't know how to use a mouse. I straight up told him that he's just decided he can't use it, but I know that he can. He was quiet after that. This user's comments have been overwritten to protest Spez and Reddit's actions that will end third-party access and damage the community. My brother-in-law loves to have debates where he just wants to hear himself talk to make himself feel smarter. His arguments include, I haven't heard of that before, so it must not be true, and pulling argument points from YouTube videos on the topic because he doesn't read. Why would I when I can get the info faster from a video? He sprays paint as his career and has never been to college but took calculus in high school, and that is his proof he is smarter than everyone else. When it is brought up, all he says is, oh yeah, I remember calculus, it is as easy. What is it about? You know, calculus. Easy stuff. I stopped engaging him on his debates when he just claimed everything was a government job and everything was fake news, didn't see it on YouTube. Flat earthers. This is the best answer. They used science to try and prove it's flat, but the math came back as curved and they still didn't believe it. I assume you're talking about the documentary that was on Netflix. I wish it was still there. I've never been so frustrated while laughing so hard in my life. Except when they started trying to get it into textbooks. Then I was just sad and angry. My good buddy wrote his capstone thesis on something about Islam. The dude spoke Arabic, is smart as hell, a history nut, and consumes books like they are Skittles. Anyway, he got into a long debate on Reddit with someone. He started showing sources, teaching the guy, etc. Anyway, he was about 500 words into a mega retort when he decided to actually look up the dude's posting history. Turns out that dude was a drink your own urine evangelist. I feel like that is Reddit in a nutshell. So many times. So I'm on my condo board again. Sigh. Because being on the board means a lot of dealing with idiots. The worst thing is, they aren't normally stupid people, most of them, until they focus on some minor issue. Anyway, sensor for the lights in our laundry room failed. We replaced it. I get a knock on my door from an owner, who I'll call Bonnie, because fuck Bonnie. Anyway, she's upset because the sensor still isn't working properly. Now, the issue is the lights won't turn off. I stood in there for 15 minutes, and they didn't turn off. It wastes electricity. Bonnie, the sensor keeps the lights on as long as somebody is in the room. And you were in the room. So, the lights couldn't turn off. That's the condensed version, so, after about 10 minutes of her not grasping that being in the room means the light sensor won't turn them off. Well, the laundry room is inside of my condo. So, when we hit the 10-minute mark, and she's not in the room but instead, in my face, the lights go off. And I point that out. "I thought you said you would be a good president." Thank God she's now so scared of me she wouldn't say shit with a mouth full. "I thought you said you would be a good president." Obviously you should have gone in with a platform of, "I'll be utter shit," to temper expectations. Someone posted an article that provided direct evidence against what he was claiming. Pointed it out, and he said, "I didn't know it was in that article or I wouldn't have used that one." I'm a medical doctor, and someone on Reddit was saying that a particular medication, for condition A, should never be used off-label, for condition B. I use this medication for B, see it prescribed all the time for condition B, and there are papers supporting its off-label use. Redditor gets angry, calls out anyone using the medication as wild, crazy, and irresponsible, so I retorted by submitting a citation for the paper that says it is safe. I post a conclusion statement from the article that literally says in conclusion, "This medication is safe and totally fine to take for condition B." Instead of saying, "Oh, okay, thanks," he takes one word out of the article, calls me the dumbest guy on the planet, extrapolates from the one word that the drug is dangerous, deadly, and is back on his "you're all idiots if you take this drug." I wanted to argue the point again, but realized now was the time to pull the plug. It's pointless. A driver fell asleep at the wheel for a brief moment. The passenger noticed the car drift into the oncoming lane and exclaimed "Jesus Christ" in fear. The driver woke up and turned the car back to their lane. It was impossible to have the passenger, and their whole family, admit this was not evidence that Jesus himself saved them. I was exhausted by the end of that conversation. I'm exhausted just thinking about dealing with those people. Had an employee sign an NDA about an upcoming art installation that had investors. He told everyone. He argued with me the NDA only meant he couldn't disclose anything with the people in the company. Former employee, I hope. Me and the person who replies to this comment will demonstrate this for you live. Peepness. Arguing with a flat earther when they've watched hundreds of videos about it, and you're not a physicist or geologist. Trust me, being a geologist doesn't help either. Reddit. Several times I've seen people on this site agree over something but still manage to argue over it. I'm showing my age here, but I used to work for an estate agency, and we had sales offices set up at the site of large new housing developments. Our primary method of communication was fax. One of the sales associates telephoned our office to say that the fax machine had run out of paper. "No problem," I said, "one of the guys is coming your way later for a house tour. I'll give him a box of paper to give to you." We then had an almost 20-minute long argument when they kept insisting, "And no, you just send me a blank fax because I need the paper. It will just come out of my fax machine." It was like trying to nail jelly to a tree. Difficult, irritating, and it achieved nothing. Watching the news. There are cat litter boxes in schools for people that identify as cats. One Google search will show that is not true. I am open to changing my mind if there is evidence. Others will not research to see if it's true. John Oliver talked about this if I recall correctly. There was one school that had kitty litter, and it was there because they had so many school shootings that their classrooms were prepped for lockdown. I had a friend in university who was a world-class high school debater. Over meals, she liked to pick a ridiculous proposition and then talk circles around people until they had to concede to her point, no matter how absurd. When she tried it with me, I just stonewalled her. Met every point with a solid, "I don't think that's true," or "That doesn't make sense." Eventually she gave up and never tried it with me again. It was the only time I've ever used the tactics of the stupid to win an argument. But to be fair, if you're not arguing with me in good faith, I feel no obligation to respond in good faith. When I was a child, a teacher argued with me about how my name is pronounced. Some sports guy had a first name that was spelled the same as my surname, and I guess that was the only acceptable pronunciation regardless of what little 10-year-old me tried to tell her. Okay, this'll get buried, but it was and still is hilarious to me. Way back in the day I was a bill collector for travel trailers and mobile homes. This woman had promised to mail her check for the payment, and lo and behold it doesn't appear. So I call her, and reference back to our prior conversation I say, "You promised you'd mail this to me, and it never arrived." This wasn't particularly contentious. It was more along the lines of, I thought we had an agreement and now I'm disappointed. So this woman, who is probably 30, really dumb and kinda country, says to me, I did mail it. But the post office figured out that I didn't have enough money and sent it back to me so it wouldn't bounce. My sarcastic reply, I don't understand how that could happen, she responds, completely sincere. I don't understand it either. Literally wordless after that one. Every day on social media. Brexit is a classic example of this. It was always an extremely stupid idea and they managed to beat enough of the population down to make it reality. I grew up Jewish in Oklahoma. I ran into this a lot. Had a classmate in middle school try to convince me that Christianity predates Judaism. I told him, but Jesus was Jewish. His response, exactly. No irony. Totally genuine. Conversation over. I asked a representative from the friend of the court to explain something she said, and she told me that I understood what she was saying. I replied that I wouldn't have asked her to explain if I had understood. She said if I was going to be difficult, she would hold me in contempt. My ex chimed in that she didn't quite understand what she had said and was greeted with a smile and an explanation. From that point on, I always disagreed with the friend of the court on everything, so that I could be seen by the actual court and a judge. I work at a club where the bouncer gives you a card when you enter. The card has multiple lines with squares on it, each one being a different drink, vodka, gin, tequila, etc., and the barman just make an X on the drinks you order. All mixers are free except Red Bull. At the top of the card there's a line that reads, Red Bull Mix. It's also the cheapest thing on the card. I've had a customer order a Red Bull Mix, and literally argue with me for about 10 minutes demanding that I serve it while I calmly explain to them that line is only a mixer and they actually have to order something else. They eventually asked for a manager that just told me to mark it and serve them a shot of Red Bull. The look on the customer was priceless. They were as pleased they won the argument as they were disappointed paying €2.50 for a sip of Red Bull. Politicians and mental gymnastics. See, too many people get attached to a political side, like they are choosing their favorite football team. That's why they do mental gymnastics literally every day, because, let's face it, many politics say one thing today and the opposite tomorrow. But nobody wants to feel like they are dumb and they fell for a lie, so it's better to convince themselves again and again. If people saw political parties as what they are, just people you vote, and if they don't deliver what they promised, you vote another party. Edit to add, I know voting third parties is bullshit in almost every country. What I was trying to say is that many people defend their parties more than their lives, lol. I have voted parties I think are bullshit but were better than the alternative. I just don't defend them when they have done bad things or tried to argue that they didn't happen. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.